Okay, welcome you back. Now we are in the global TBTI website. Again, Sri Lanka Ocean University has organized the World Ocean Day program with the partnership of the apex bodies of Sri Lanka. Those are the Ministry of Fisheries, Sri Lanka Forum for Small Scale Fisheries, National Aquatic Resource Research and Development Agency, Sri Lanka Association for Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, Marine Environmental Protection Authority, and the National Fisheries Solidarity. Let us start with the video presentation of the role of the partner organization in blue growth and sustainable livelihood. Okay, we are proud and we are fortunate to happy the message from World Bank in our World Ocean Day program. So now let's move to the message from the World Bank done by Tijen Erin Madam. She is a senior environmental economist at the World Bank's Environment, Natural Resources and the Blue Economy Global Practice, currently working on the South Asia region. She is the team leader for a comprehensive advisory services and analyst works on Sri Lanka priorities for sustainably managing Sri Lanka's fisheries and the ecosystem. The support team, which is being carried out in partnership with the Ministry of Fisheries. Let us move to the message from Tijen Erin from World Bank.
Good morning. I'd like to congratulate the Ocean University and its governmental and non-governmental partners for organizing this webinar on blue growth for sustainable livelihoods on the World Oceans Day. The webinar features panel discussions on two very important topics that the government is considering as it is trying to increase, as it's planning its next steps to enhance the fisheries sector's contribution to the economy and to the welfare of the Sri Lankan society in a sustainable manner, of course, in an environmentally and socially sustainable manner. Now, thinking beyond sectors and subsectors, of course, we see again and again how the different elements of the blue economy interact with each other and they impact each other. Most recently, unfortunately, we've seen this in a negative, we've seen the very negative impact. The pollution that's unfortunately has been caused by the vessel fire disaster off the coast of Colombo has polluted the ocean water and the coast on which fisheries and tourism depend. The impact may be felt for years to come. So this underlines the importance of managing the blue economy and its elements in a coordinated manner. The Ocean University will play a very important role in equipping Sri Lanka's planners, policymakers, sector specialists, and technicians with world-class knowledge and skills to address these challenges. When it comes to education and skills, of course, Sri Lanka has a very strong foundation. And I can tell also from our recent work with Dr. Amarasinghe and his students from Ruhuna University that the Ocean University itself is built on a very strong foundation. We look forward to opportunities for working with the Ocean University and other Sri Lankan universities in the years to come. Thank you, and I wish you a good webinar.
Thank you very much, madam. It inspired us and gained lots of energy. Thank you. Let's move to the message from FAO. Again, we are lucky and proud to have message from FAO in our international webinar. This message will be delivered from FAO, Mr. Charles, who is a fisheries officer for Blue Growth at FAO's Fisheries Division. He is a Mexican national. He has a master's in marine affairs and policy. He has worked in a variety of blue economic activities, including sport and commercial fishing and aquaculture. He has also worked to improve industrial fisheries and also supported the development of the SSF guidelines approved by FAO in 2012. He is currently coordinating the development of FAO's Blue Transformation Framework, which will focus the transformation of fisheries and aquaculture to meet the world's needs by 2030 and beyond. Dear Sir, I invite you to deliver your message from FAO. Thank you.
Good morning and happy World Oceans Day. My name is Carlos Ventevilla and I'm a Fisheries Officer for Blue Growth at FAO's Fisheries Division. Thank you to the Oceans University of Sri Lanka and its partners for inviting FAO to this discussion on how to ensure blue growth and the blue economy benefit small-scale fishers and farmers. The idea for a blue economy was introduced by large ocean states, such as Sri Lanka, at the Rio Plus 20 conference in 2012 to highlight the opportunities provided by oceans economy. It reflects the need to reorganize our oceanic activities to achieve environmental, economic, and social development, including decent jobs, sustainable livelihoods, and secure rights for all people. Naturally, fisheries and aquaculture are traditional and critical sectors in the blue economy, given their role in providing high-quality, nutritious food and livelihoods, as well as their potential leadership and stewardship of the environment. With a growing interest in blue economy and blue growth, we must make it clear that any strategy, plan, or investment that does not ensure the sustainability of aquatic food systems, including livelihoods, should not be considered a blue initiative. We must ensure as a community of practitioners that the ideas championed by large ocean states are not misapplied. For this reason, and to create clarity on our objectives, at FAO we've decided to focus our efforts on a blue transformation rather than growth of fisheries and aquaculture. We must continue to transform fisheries and aquaculture to conserve resources and continue providing nutritious food, income, and cultural and social benefits to growing and vulnerable populations. These aquatic or blue food systems must also include inland fisheries and aquaculture, given their significant contributions to human well-being. This blue transformation focuses on sustainable aquaculture development, transformed fisheries management, and upgraded and enhanced value chains that produce sustainable, resilient, safe, and accessible foods and provide resilient and sustainable livelihoods. Our ultimate goal is that nutritious blue foods are a core focus of blue economy policies, that they are available and accessible to those that need them most, and that stakeholders involved in their production can secure or improve their livelihoods. The small-scale fisheries guidelines are a core tool to achieve this transformation, and we must work closely to apply them in their totality. This can only be done with effective partnerships that include governments, dedicated research institutions, regional organizations, and representative organizations for fishers, fish farmers, and fish workers. Certainly, our collaboration with partners such as the Ocean University of Sri Lanka, the Sri Lanka Forum for Small-Scale Fisheries, and dedicated government agencies is an example of this. We hope that Sri Lanka moves towards a sustainable oceans economy. It thinks it's fair, inclusive, and sustainable transformation rather than growth, and ensures the participation of and benefits for small-scale fishers and farmers, and remains open and available to collaborate with any initiative that provides training and knowledge to the blue food systems of Sri Lanka. We remain open to collaborate with all partners and appreciate that this webinar focuses on proactive solutions for fishers and fish farmers in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, and have a very good World Oceans Day.
Thank you very much, sir, for your inspiring speech. Now, let us move to the technical sessions of the day. The first technical session will be under the theme of Blue Growth for Sustainable Life and Livelihood. So, by Professor Swain Gentov. So, I cordially invite Professor Oscar Amarasinghe to introduce the keynote speaker to the session. Yes, sir. Divska, are you there?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Let me introduce
kindly.
Professor Sven. In fact, does not need any introduction. He's a world-renowned social scientist, known to all parts of the world for his work on small-scale fisheries. He's from the Norwegian College of Fisheries Science, Professor Emeritus, and which is the Tromsø University, called the Tromsø University, quite common generally. He has worked extensively on fisheries and coastal issues, including resource management, industrial organization, community development in many parts of the world. And he has published more than 25 books and numerous journal articles on fisheries and coastal governance. He is also a founding member and an active member of the Too Big to Ignore, which organizes the WOW program today, and which is a small-scale fishery research partnership. And we had done a lot of work. His most recent work is the book titled "The Life Above Water: Essays on Human Experience of Small-Scale Fisheries," which came out in 2019. So, without any more things on Sven, who is known to all of us, let me give the floor to Sven. It is yours, Sven.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Let me first say how grateful I am for having this opportunity to give this keynote. It is indeed an honor. I only wish I could have delivered it face to face in Sri Lanka, but this is the time we are living in. The title of my presentation, Risks and Opportunities for Small-Scale Fisheries in the Blue Economy. Sorry, I need to share this screen. There we go. The title of my presentation, Risk and Opportunities for Small-Scale Fisheries in the Blue Economy, refers to a topic that I've talked about and written about for a while now. I have argued that if states do nothing to implement the small-scale fisheries guidelines, the blue economy will come at a loss to small-scale fisheries. There is enough evidence out there to suggest that this risk is real, it is present, and it must be taken seriously. There we go. Okay. The full name of the small-scale fisheries guidelines, which you see here, includes the phrase "in the context of poverty eradication and food security." Both are social justice issues related to the human rights of small-scale fisheries people, their rights to food and equity and well-being and freedom. If the blue economy can deliver on these issues, that's great. Then threats may turn into opportunities, but only then. I'm not impressed by what my own government is doing to implement the small-scale fisheries guidelines here at home. There is a lot of talk about the blue economy, but no mentioning of the guidelines. I know that Norway is helping financially to implement the guidelines around the world, which is great, by all means, but it's not possible to see much trace of the guidelines in the Norwegian fisheries policies, which is a pity. the small-scale fisheries guidelines are also needed in the north. A Norwegian fisher just expressed his frustration in our fisheries press. He said, and I'm translating it, if coastal fishers had been a distinct marine species, they would have been on the red list for more than 40 years now. One should not expect, perhaps, drastic policy move because of the small-scale fisheries guidelines. The implementation will take time, but if we take what this young fisher is saying seriously, we don't have much of it. We cannot afford to be patient. The small-scale fisheries guidelines are a landmark achievement. It is the first global instrument directly targeting small-scale fisheries. I'm happy to have been involved in the process of developing them, also as a member of the Norwegian delegation during the technical consultations in 2013 and 14. For me, it was an interesting experience in many ways, also as a process of language development. The small-scale fisheries guidelines are a text of sentences and words spread out in 100 paragraphs. Therefore, the negotiations that led to their final endorsement in June 2014 were about how sentences should be phrased, which words to use, and what they meant. There were often strong disagreements about whether certain words and sentences should be used at all. For instance, it did not take long for delegates to take down the suggestion that the small-scale fisheries guidelines should have a definition of small-scale fisheries. Governance was a concept that proved controversial. Should the word redistribution be in the guidelines? The dispute about the concept of colonization almost killed the guidelines. In the end, it was replaced with another word that changed the meaning of that particular article where it was originally mentioned. The term "as appropriate" appears 18 times in the small-scale fisheries guidelines. For instance, in Article 5.8, it says, the term the states should adopt measures to facilitate equitable access to fisheries resources for small-scale fishing communities, including, and here it comes, as appropriate redistributive reform. It is still unclear to me whether delegates meant the same thing with the term. Was the term a way to put at ease those who had reservations against a particular article? Or was the idea that context mattered and that a pragmatic approach would be needed? Clearly, the term satisfies both concerns, and it works to underscore the voluntary nature of the guidelines. The blue economy and blue growth concepts are not in the small-scale fisheries guidelines. I cannot remember anyone suggesting that they should. Now these concepts are all over the world. The pace at which concepts travel these days is amazing. Globalization is also about the proliferation of language, the way we talk about things. Now we talk about the blue economy when we talk about small-scale fisheries, but the opposite is rarely the case. We use language to understand what we see and to make other people see the same things as we see. We use language to understand what we do and to explain what we do, but we also need language to legitimize the things we do. And here is the point. The one who controls the language controls the conversation. And the one who controls the conversation controls the action. Therefore, language is power. The marginalization of small-scale fisheries, a word that pops up 19 times in the small-scale fisheries guidelines, is also about language. Consequently, if you want to make the blue economy work for you, you must take control of the language. This is also necessary for small-scale fisheries people. With the small-scale fisheries guidelines, they are better equipped to speak for themselves and raise issues close to their heart. They are likely to lose out in the blue economy if they don't do this. The question is how they should do it, which brings me into the more philosophical discourse on language, about how words get their meaning. Notably, this is not an academic issue only, with no practical implication. Quite the contrary, I would argue. Fisheries governance, including the implementation of the small-scale fisheries guidelines, is totally language dependent. We cannot do it without language. We therefore have all the reasons in the world to explore how language works, to shape the discourse about blue economy, as far as small-scale fisheries are concerned. If we are occupied with the challenge of the implementation of the small-scale fisheries guidelines, we must be occupied with the functioning of language. I do not know a better way of explaining this point than by a quote from the Swiss novelist and Nobel Prize winner Hermann Hesse from his book, The Steppenwolf. He says, just imagine a garden with hundreds of different trees, thousands of different flowers, hundreds of different fruits and herbs. Now, if the only botanical distinction the gardener knows is that between edible things and weeds, he will not know what to do with 9/10 of his garden. He will uproot the most enchanting flowers, fell the finest trees, or at any rate detest and frown upon them. Clearly, the gardener would benefit from a richer language. He would see more of the biodiversity that he has in the garden, and he would recognize the beauty that is there in front of him. He would also be more cautious about what he does with his garden, because the paucity of his language destroys what he is there to protect and nurture. I leave it to you to draw the parallel to small-scale fisheries governance. Now that 2022 is going to be the International Year of the Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, how should we talk about them? It is important to make sure that the implementation of the small-scale fisheries guidelines and the blue economy do not become separate discourses with no link between them. But to create that link, we need new language. This issue came up during the World Small-Scale Fisheries Congress in 2018, when in Chiang Mai, when Professor Moniba Isaacs from South Africa introduced the concept of blue justice. It has since become a key focus of TBTI. Rolf Willman of FAO suggested during the 2019 Mare conference that we should try to get it recognized in Wikipedia, which we have. Rolf Willman was, as you would know, the main architect of the small-scale fisheries guidelines. So if you check blue justice in Wikipedia, you would see how we defined it. Blue justice is a composite and complex concept, but it is also intuitive and at the same level of abstraction as the blue economy. We may therefore talk about blue justice as easily as we talk about blue economy. Once the blue justice concept is made part of the blue economy language game, to use Ludwig Wittgenstein's concept, it would require a response, just like in any other game. It is important, of course, that the rules of the game, the language game, are not imposed on small-scale fisheries. Which rules about which language, which concepts to use, which arguments to make, which topics to raise, and whose voices should be heard. The blue justice concept carries a long tradition of philosophical argumentation. It also has a moral foundation that is difficult to reject. Notably, the blue justice concept, as TBTI defines it on Wikipedia, is beyond the narrow legal interpretation which is used in the context in connection with IUU fishing and law enforcement at sea. You may have seen the Copenhagen Declaration. Blue justice in the broader meaning of TBTI is relational, multidimensional, material as well as moral. We think of it as a process of social struggle. For those short of words, how to capture what blue justice means for small-scale fisheries, these small-scale fisheries guidelines are a treasure chest. But it is also important to stress that the blue economy requires a much richer narrative. The concept must be founded in practical, lived experience of those for whom injustice is part of their history and daily life. Wittgenstein argued that a word does not get its meaning from other words, but from what the thing we call by a name and how it is used and how it is practiced, how it works in real life in its particular context. Wittgenstein, here he is. Wittgenstein inspired my longtime colleague Jakob Meller in the philosophy department of my university when he wrote, "Our concepts of the world comes from our activities in the world." He added the example, "Without coastal fishing or seafaring in boats too large for the crews to draw them ashore, there is no place for the concept of harbor." The point here is that the true meaning of the blue economy is not to be found in glossy pamphlets, in seductive language, in political statements about the ocean as a new frontier for economic growth, but how the blue economy works in practice, like for people in small-scale fishing communities. Then we should, of course, not forget that justice also have emotional dimensions. When we see injustice, we get morally upset, but often also speechless. However, the paucity of language does not make injustice less real in the blue economy. It just makes people defenseless. Wittgenstein said, and I quote, "Concepts lead us to make investigations, are expressions of our interest and direct our interest. Therefore, we need a concept like blue justice to bring attention to an issue of crucial importance to small-scale fisheries, which cannot be defined away and by that ignored. You cannot say that marginalization is not what the blue economy means if that is what it does to small-scale fisheries. You cannot say that this is not part of the blue economy if that is what it does to small-scale fisheries. Without a concept of like blue justice, there is a bigger risk that small-scale fisheries get overrun in the blue economy language game, a game they cannot afford to lose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for the very informative keynote speech. Thank you. So as we are a little bit running behind the time, let's move directly to the panel discussion on the keynote speech. So I cordially invite the panelists, Professor Martin Banwick, the chair of the panel, and Professor Swain Yentov and Professor Oscar Amarasinghe, Madam France Nicolay, Professor M.G. Kularatne, and Mr. Sebastian Matthew will be the panelists, and the rapporteurs will be Ms. S.N. Dushani, Ms. K. Piasiri, and Ms. S. Samarasekara. I kindly remind you that we're supposed to finish by 10:53, so kindly manage your time and let us start with the panel discussion. Thank you.
So Ale Vanakkam. Good morning, everyone, on this World Ocean Day. My name is Martin Banwick, and I have the opportunity and the pleasure of chairing this session. Professor Yentov has focused the theme of this day on the role and the fate of small-scale fisheries in the context of the blue economy. And he has titled his presentation Risks and Opportunities for Small-Scale Fisheries. And I think the sequence of these words, first putting risks and then opportunities, is not completely by coincidence. Focusing on small-scale fisheries is, in the Sri Lankan context, very relevant, with a very large number of people involved in the small-scale fisheries economy on all shores of the island. It is also in this context that the oil spill, which is taking place right now, is very worrying because it will affect the livelihoods of many of these people, and is maybe also precisely an indication of the kinds of interactions which can take place in the context of a blue economy. Professor Yentov pays attention to the role of language, focusing on the term blue justice, and this term draws attention to possible unfairness taking place in the context of the blue economy and to the need for addressal of this injustice. He has paid attention to the voluntary guidelines on small-scale fisheries, and also pointed out how its content provides confidence to small-scale fisher people. Well, I'm happy now to have a panel. We have only limited time, but we have speakers who are very familiar both with the voluntary guidelines as well as with the small-scale fisheries. And you will see the names in the program. I am taking the liberty to change the sequence a little bit of the speakers. And I propose that we have, or we try to have, 2 rounds in which, in the first round, each speaker will indicate some responses to the keynote address by Professor Yentov. And then hopefully, if we have time, we can also engage in some further conversation, but we only have 20 minutes. My suggestion is that we have the following sequence. First, we start with Ms. Nicole Frans from FAO, then move to Professor Kularatne, then to Mr. Sebastian Matthew, to Professor Oscar Amarasinghe, and lastly, go back to Professor Jens, he can maybe say something in response to what other people have been saying. So that is the situation now. Let us move, if I may, to invite Nicole Franz for her first observations. Nicole.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you very much to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to participate in these celebrations of World Oceans Day. It's a pleasure to be here with you. From the keynote speech by Professor Yentov, we clearly could hear that the blue economy or the blue growth concept is challenged, as it is often perceived to only confirm and strengthen the existing power imbalances. And Professor Yentov also has pointed to these SSF guidelines as a tool to support achieving social justice. And I'm pleased to report that a small but increasing number of countries is now taking on the challenge to implement these guidelines. Before I share some more information and thoughts, I would like, however, to take the opportunity to pay tribute to a person that played an important role in the development of the guidelines. Fabio Hazin, a Brazilian professor, practitioner, and government employee, he lost his life yesterday when COVID took his last forces to battle other health challenges. Fabio was a chair of the FAO technical consultation through which the SSF guidelines were negotiated, and which Professor Yentov also attended as part of the Norwegian delegation. So he chaired those negotiations that took place over 2 weeks, where the text of the guidelines was negotiated word by word in 6 languages. And I think this is another reason for us to honor the words that are in these guidelines, as were also pointed out by Professor Yentov in his keynote speech. Sorry, I'm a bit emotional on this point. So I think what is also important, what was mentioned, is the importance to acknowledge the diversity of small-scale fisheries, which was nicely explained by the example given, by the reference given to Hermann Hesse by Svein. This diversity is really a richness in a world where we're increasingly witnessing globalization of food systems, with a small number of global players dominating the choices we have of what we eat. But who eats what and where is really important. A study conducted by the World Bank, by FAO and World Fish in 2012, called The Hidden Harvest, the global contribution of capture fisheries, found that over half of the catch in developing countries is produced by the small-scale subsector. And another finding of that study was that 90 to 95% of the small-scale landings are destined for local human consumption. So this really provides a strong justification to support the small-scale sector from a food security and nutrition policy perspective, and to value catch in terms of nutrition rather than just monetarily, as it supplies really a range of highly nutritious aquatic food that is affordable, also to the more vulnerable and the more marginalized, like small children and pregnant women, for example. So I'm going to stop here because I know we're tight on time. Looking forward to have another chance to comment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicole, for your contribution. Let us move now to Professor Kularatne. Please, the floor is yours.
Sir, please unmute your mic. Kularatne, sir, please unmute your mic.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for asking me to join with you. And this is very, very, very important day. Actually, I'm myself limited because the time constraints is very, very serious for all of us. And what I'm interested with this Professor Yentov's speech is with the Sri Lankan context, actually. In the beginning, as I understood, he said that there is nothing to do with the government. Actually, nothing has done the respective government for implementing small-scale fisheries, I guess. And when it comes to Sri Lankan situation, that the fisheries policies, which is already proposed to do, as we understand, they haven't included very much small-scale fisheries beliefs and activities, or whatever their perceptions into the fisheries policy. And this can be the very big issue of implementing small-scale fisheries guidelines, simply because the government authorities should understand the local ecological knowledge, how it is important for managing small-scale fisheries. And the second point, which I'm really interested in, that the small-scale fisheries must aiming at poverty eradication and the food security. But unfortunately, in some countries, especially in our context, are we looking at increasing income, or are we looking at the eradication of the poverty of the small-scale fishers, or increasing food security? And my understanding is poor are very much involving in small-scale fisheries, and also they are lacking of nutrition level. And therefore, we must increase, and we must give some high emphasis to implementing this small-scale fisheries guidelines with the poor, incorporating fisheries policies in any respective government. And also the last point, which I really interested in with this blue justice, I wonder whether that blue justice is really talking about that the local ecological knowledge to incorporate into the fisheries policies, and whether it is really meaning the blue justice is really discussing with incorporating this local ecological knowledge into fisheries policies. I'm really happy, and thank you very much, because I have to stop right now with allowing other people to talk. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Kula Ratna from the University of Kelania. We will now move on to Mr. Sebastian Matthew from the International Collective for the Support of Fish Workers, ICSF. Go ahead, Mr. Matthew.
Thank you, Professor Babing, and thank you, Professor Amrisinke, for inviting ICSF to this important event. And at the outset, like Nicole, I would also like to pay my homage to Fabio Hazin, who played a very important role during the very, very tough and difficult negotiations, and Swain referred to it in his presentation. And thanks, Swain, for your wonderful presentation. So I think just to put it from a historical perspective, I think important to remember the 1980 IUCN World Conservation Strategy. So in fact, it is the first document that I could lay my hands on, which talks about the importance of human rights in removing or overcoming poverty. So it remained like that, but then you started the law of the sea negotiation. There is no mention of small-scale fisheries or poverty eradication. And then in 1984, along with the World Conference on Fisheries Management and Development, Professor John Kurian organized a parallel conference, which I think brought to light many aspects of human rights that apply to small-scale fisheries, particularly poverty. And then I can see that the most important contribution of the guidelines, the small-scale fisheries guidelines, was to address the complexity of livelihoods on the one hand, and to address the poverty of fishing communities that Professor Kuraratne also referred to. So therefore, I think this is a very important achievement because the guidelines very strongly and evocatively provide enough language to deal with the poverty issues, the issues of food security. And again, as Swain mentioned, when you say in the context of food security and poverty eradication, when you say the context means you're weaving everything through these two perspectives. Therefore, when it comes to blue economy and blue justice, what I would like to propose is that I would like to see the blue economy as a concept looking at the ocean from the high seas. High seas to the land is a perspective which I take from the blue economy perspective. And when we talk about human rights-based approach, I see that we are looking at the marine resources from a livelihood perspective. So if you really centralize livelihood perspective, we are not going to marginalize small-scale fisheries whatsoever, be the pressure of blue economy. So therefore, I think we should focus our energy on the implementation of the guidelines, which provide all the language on tenure rights, on human rights, and various other institutional aspects. So therefore, we can definitely use this as the kind of the fulcrum to look at the coastal resources. And then along with that, I mean, although today is the World Ocean Day, I would also like to highlight the importance of inland fisheries. Sri Lanka also has inland fisheries, and many fisheries have, very large number of people dependent on inland resources. And many communities refer to the ocean beginning in the mountains. Therefore, if you see from a land to the ocean, you will definitely see the importance of the guidelines. So therefore, the guidelines definitely can be the safety net, and guidelines definitely has to be exhausted, that livelihood options, before we talk about other uses of ocean space. And again, in terms of just numbers, you can see that the largest number of people even seeking a livelihood from the ocean space are in small scale fisheries. Therefore, even from a very sheer number perspective, this sector cannot be overlooked. So therefore, let us not lose track of the perspective. Let us keep it from land to the sea, and then see how the concept of justice and human rights and poverty eradication, food security, all can help to completely remove the marginalization. And again, Swain referred to how many times marginalization is used in the guidelines, and excellent instrument. Let us focus on that. Let's not dilute it by getting too much into the blue economy kind of rhetoric here. Thank you.
So thank you, Sebastian. Let's move now to Professor Amarasinghe, Chancellor of the Ocean University. Oscar, do you have any comments to make in response to Swain's keynote?
Yes, I had a few, but I want to confine it to at least one because of that time constraint. I was really, absorbed by the Swain's emphasis on the language, the power of the language. So, as you all know, in Sri Lanka, we had a long process of implementation of the SSF guidelines, 2018 and 19, and we produced even a small-scale fisheries policy. And in this guideline, we went all around the country. Like 12 out of the 15 districts, we interviewed not only the fisher stakeholders, but at the same time the state actors, institutions which are involved in the coastal strip. So we have really first-hand, experience with the guidelines. And what we did was, we have the guidelines produced by the FAO. Then we made the translations of it in the two local languages, Tamil and Sinhalese. And on top of that, we also produced a simplified set of guidelines. And we kept everything on the table for people to pick up. And inside the auditorium, we see everybody was reading the simplified, even the state actors. They didn't pick up, they didn't read the FAO thing, and even the translation. So language mattered. So even the simplified guidelines, there were questions. People were asking after even simplification. So this is something that we have to think of. We are talking about sectoral integration, institutional coordination, and management platforms which are integrated, inclusive, participatory, holistic. Okay, what about the language? Do we speak the same language? That is the whole problem. So I think for the coming year, 2022, the year of artisanal fisheries and aquaculture is something that we have to think of. Building the capacity of people to speak the same language. Even the state actors need to be, trained, or their capacity should be built along with the community actors. So this is something that I had my attention. Or I should emphasize. We have already started, to tell you frankly, with Nicole's. We spoke about building capacity, the second phase of the FAO project after producing the SSF guidelines, the SSF policy. So I hope to start with this when we next year, the year of artisanal fisheries and aquaculture, to start with building the capacities of these various groups in language, to speak the same language. Okay, madam.
Okay, thank you, Professor Amarasinghe. Thanks also for telling us a bit more about how you have been working and trying to implement the guidelines in the Sri Lankan context. I think that's very interesting. Let us now move lastly to Professor Jentoft again. Maybe some short comments, because I understand that we are already over time, how time flies. Sveins, maybe a few comments on what you have heard.
All were great comments, and I think they all, had important points to make, and I agree with all of them. To Professor Kolaratne, the issue of knowledge is of course important, and any conversation about what to do within the blue economy to promote the interest of small-scale fisheries must, of course, be rooted in people's realities and how they talk about their own challenges. There is a concept called epistemic justice, just to underline this point more theoretically. So it is certainly a part of how we talk about blue economy. I like Sebastian Matthews' point of view, shifting the perspective from ocean to land, into land to ocean. And I think that's basically what we are arguing here. And that is also what motivated my book, Life Above Water, as a contrast to life below water, which is in the SDGs, as we know. So I think that is important shift of perspective. And it's interesting how shift in perspective, when we shift the way we talk about things, how things become very different as to what we do. So there is a clear connection between our perspectives, how we phrase them, and what we eventually do with it. And that is certainly the point I wanted to make. And then to Oscar's point about we need to speak the same language. There is truth to that, but there is also problems with that, because it is worrisome if we all of a sudden start to talk about the challenges which we know are very different from situation to situation, from country to country, and then all of a sudden start to talk about them in the same way. We use the same kind of concepts to actually to pinpoint what the challenge is. And this is why I think this message from Wittgenstein is so important. Concepts get their meaning from how they are used in particular contexts. The same language, the same words can mean different things according to which context we are talking about. So it is true that we need to speak a language that we can all understand, but it is also important that our language reflect the kind of diversity that Nicole Franz alluded to, which is important to remember. And that
Professor
is why,
Jentoft.
Yeah, and that I'm going to finish now. Yeah, and that is what I believe is the message in the quote I made of Hermann Hesse. Thank you.
So thank you very much, all of you, all the speakers in this panel. I'm sorry we had so little time, but the program is continuing with other interesting and important things. So I'll hand the floor back to Dr. Lanka, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It's very informative. But as we are running behind, let's directly move to the next item. Students are the spirit of the university. Let us have a small break with a musical rest. I invite the students of Ocean University to add a color and glamour to the event.
ජීවිත නැව පෙරලී මුතු සොයන අය කොහෙදෝ පනනල පාගා මෙරනේ පිය At the edge of the water, long as I can remember, never really knowing why. I wish I could be the perfect daughter, but I come back to the water, no matter how hard I try. Every turn I take, every trail I track, every path I make, every road leads back to the place I know where I cannot go, where I long to be. Sing along with the sky, the sea, it goes me, and no one knows how far I go. With me here in my sail, the sea stays behind me. One day there's no telling how far I'll go. I know everybody on this island seems so happy on this island. Everything's by design. I know everybody on this island has a role on this island, so maybe I can roll with mine. I can make it right, I can make us strong. I decide it's right, but they alone. But ever since I see a different song, what's wrong with me? Neti saya kane, bolu pedalayanne, verna durapelenne, malu balaenne. Neti saya kane, bolu pedalayanne, verna durapelenne, aku malu balaenne. Mudaranne usse, bolu pedalayanne.
Thank you, students. So let us move to the technical session 2. So the keynote speaker will be Professor Joy Baker. I will cordially invite Dr. MFM Fairuz, the Dean, Faculty of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences, to give a brief introduction of our second keynote speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Anka. Good morning. Professor Joy Baker is an Associate Professor of Aquatic Animal Health and Production at the University of Sydney, Australia. She obtained her Doctor of Philosophy degree from Atlantic Veterinary College, Canada. She worked on the fish health and she does research on focusing on understanding and controlling production, limiting diseases affecting global aquaculture. She has co-authored 4 books, book chapters, 43 peer-reviewed scientific publications. She is also co-editor-in-chief, Aquaculture and Fisheries, Fish and Fisheries Journal. So she is also at the moment working with multiple stakeholder grant for Sri Lanka to develop the mariculture ventures. So I wish her all the best, and I am pleased to invite to deliver her keynote address on epidemiological approaches to improve diseases management in marine aquaculture. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. It is certainly an honor to be here, and I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation. Now I'm going to share my screen. Great. So like Professor Sven, I too would much rather have been delivering this in person in Sri Lanka and being able to meet all of you. I do hope one day in the not so distant future, I'm able to visit Ocean University and meet many of you in person. That would be really fantastic. The title of my talk today is Epidemiological Approaches to Improving Disease Management in Marine Aquaculture. I'm going to start with thanking my contributing authors. So of course, I'm going to be presenting you some research today, and it's been a collaboration with many different people from many different countries over many years. And in particular, I would like to highlight my colleague and friend, Dr. Marwan Toko from Indonesia, as well as the team at the Brackish Water Aquaculture Development Center in Banda Aceh, Indonesia. So as we've heard today, of course, aquatic animals are absolutely important to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And there's a number of key goals that aquatic species will play a direct role in. So in particular, we have the big focus today on food security. And we do know that fish and fisheries products are about 17% of the animal protein consumed as a global population. So where does that fit when we think about our other animal protein sources? Well, I'm in a veterinary school, so usually people focus on these animals down here. And I always like to show this graph because I like to show them where fish really fits in when we think about it on a global scale. So fish absolutely is the top of the charts for the importance of where we get our animal protein. Now, of course, we do know that fish and fisheries products come from our 2 major sources, which are linked very closely together. So we have our wild capture fisheries as well as our aquaculture production. When we look at graphs like this, I always like to tell my students that we need to be careful of the asterisks in these graphs. So this aquaculture line looks really high and quite steep, but it isn't just animals. We have to remember it also includes plants, and it also includes parts of aquaculture that actually aren't for human consumption. So for instance, in Australia, we have quite a large pearling industry, and that would be included in this value as well. The other asterisk, of course, is around the capture fisheries. So not all of our capture fisheries are for human consumption, only about 2/3 of that. So when we look at where we're getting our actual fish and fish products, we are actually tipping the scales towards aquaculture. So in the 2018 version of Sophia, we've actually got aquaculture being a greater contributor to fish products around the world than capture fisheries. And we're only going to see that number go up. So our biggest consumers and our biggest producers of fish products is China. Absolutely leads the world. They're almost actually off the chart. But our next major producers for aquaculture are Indonesia, India, and Vietnam, for instance. These countries, of course, are geographically quite close to each other. They do tend to farm similar types of species in similar types of environments. So we have about 90% of aquaculture happening in a very small part of the world. Now, for this talk here today, I've added Australia and Sri Lanka to the graph, which of course is very, very low at the world scale, and especially when we put it into context with China, so they look quite flat. So who is participating in the primary production of fish? So this is including both our capture fisheries as well as our aquaculture. And what we see is we don't have a very balanced gender split. So only 14% of our primary producers are actually women. Women do play a crucial role in the whole value chain for fish and fish products. So this includes a lot of secondary industries. Unfortunately, most of these secondary industries actually are quite unstable, and it's where the jobs are most poorly paid. So if we switch gears and look at where are we going to continue to get more fish products from, and we know it's probably going to be driven from aquaculture. So one of the major limiting factors for aquaculture is actually the impact of disease. And I like to pull out this snapshot of industry of production across a number of key countries. And I bring my students' attention over to this last column, because in any one country, this is how we're actually driving our disease control measures. Whether we're going to spend money to look at vaccine development or treatment control or biosecurity measures, all of this is actually driven by the economies of the industry. So if we look for just one quick example at an emerging disease outbreak in Australia. So this happened in 2016. We had white spot disease virus, which impacts shrimp and prawns. There was an outbreak in around Brisbane with a handful of farms, so just a few farms. And this is the last time the Australian government has accurate data. We're only just beginning to see the impact of this one disease outbreak roll through the economic statistics. So this one outbreak was a reduction of about 9 to 10% in productivity that year. As time goes on, we'll actually be able to see the real impact of that disease outbreak, which is still ongoing. So the Australian government is still trying to control and eradicate for white spot disease in this area. So what I'd like to talk about for the rest of my time today is the shift from an emerging disease through to managing endemic diseases. So if you happen to be farming in an area where you have a number of different pathogens and they tend to just be in the environment, we have to come up with really clever ways in order to be able to farm sufficiently, sustainably, efficiently, and keep product going through the farm. So I'm going to talk about two key viruses today. The first one is what we know as nervous necrosis virus, or NNV. Now, this virus emerged in the late 1980s. And when it first emerged, it was listed by the OIE, but it has become delisted now because it's so widespread. But it doesn't make it any less important for the region of Southeast Asia and Asia. So it is still listed in NACA and many other countries. One of the key features of nervous necrosis virus is it infects many different types of fish hosts, and they can live in marine waters through brackish and fresh water. Another key feature is that infection is common to all age groups, but we only see disease outbreaks in very young fish. So this is one of the key transmission characteristics for this virus. One of the first signs that you have a notice virus outbreak is that you actually have a lot of dead fish. It can cause mass mortalities within just a few days across a farm. The other virus I'm going to talk about is infectious spleen and kidney necrosis virus, which is quite a long virus name, so we call it ISKNV for short. It belongs to the genus known as the Megalocytes viruses. It's also quite good at killing fish, and it shares a lot of the same characteristics as the previous one, where we have subclinical infections, and it infects a wide range of hosts from marine food fish through to freshwater ornamental fish. So we're crossing that environmental barrier, and we're also crossing that barrier of the functions of where we see the different fish being used in industry. A key feature of Megalocytes viruses is there's actually what we call 3 genotypes. So red sea bream iridovirus and ISKNV are actually both listed together under the OIE chapter. So infection with either of these would be considered OIE listed. The other one is a turbot reddish body iridovirus, or TRB-IV. Now, back in about 2017, I would show a slide similar to this one, and I would say something like, RSIV is mostly only seen in marine food fish. ISKNV is mostly only seen in freshwater fish and ornamental fish. And TRBIV, we've only actually seen it in flatfish. Now, that was 2017. Today is a little bit of a different story. So I'm going to take you through a couple of disease outbreak investigations that I was involved in Indonesia. The first one is at a number of grouper nurseries in Aceh. And the second one is at a number of sea cage grow farms in Bali. Now, both of these farms are growing this similar type of species, a hybrid grouper. At the nurseries, they stock the grouper at about 3 centimeters, and over 3 or 4 months, they'll grow them up to 12 centimeters. That's when the fish are then transferred to different grow out cages or grow out sites. So they get stocked in about 12 centimeters, and in about 6 to 12 months, they reach about 600 to 800 grams and are sold live for export market. At both farms, we tend to have mixed age classes and a variety of different species on the farm at any one time. And both farming systems will use a trash fish diet. So the problem at the nurseries was first brought to our attention because during the rainy season, farmers were reporting about 80% mortality in their ponds. And what they were thinking is that there was a lot of freshwater runoff going into the ponds and changing the water quality, in particular lowering salinity and causing a lot of turbidity. So that led to farmers actually to stop farming during the wet season, which of course leads to the downwards supply issues. So there was suddenly, during certain months of the year, a supply and demand issue for getting fingerlings out to sea cages. So the group that I was involved with, we were charged with the activity of trying to identify the key pathogens that are associated with the diseases that were causing these large production losses at nurseries. So we conducted a cross-sectional survey at 7 different farms, and now so we randomly selected 30 fish from across each farm for testing for ectoparasites. We looked for virus detection using qPCR, and we used histopathology as well to confirm disease. While we were there sampling, there was actually 2 different populations of fish that were experiencing a disease outbreak on the days that we were there. So we sampled them as well. And we found that there was a mix of wild caught green grouper, which are caught just off the bay of where the farms are, as well as the hatchery fish at each of the farms. So here's our main results for parasitology. Generally, we found a lot of parasites on a lot of fish and a handful of different species. So 66 to 100% of the fish that we looked at each farm had at least one parasite. Gyrodactylus was the most common infection, whereas Trichodina was actually had the parasite with the highest burden. So we saw more Trichodina on fish than any other species. A number of farms were also infected with cryptocarrion irritants as well. Interestingly, we found that hatchery fish were 4.3 times more likely to have a higher parasite diversity. So that means more species of different parasites. And they were 25 times higher, more likely to have a high parasite load. Now this is compared to both the wild grouper. When we looked at the virus detection, so the first qPCR test we did was to look for ISKNV. And what we found was 5 of the 7 farms showed infection with ISKNV, and it ranged from anywhere from 3 to 13%. We had moderate viral loads to actually quite high viral loads. And the pathology is very key here because we saw one fish with an actual disease lesion. So of all the fish that we looked at, here's our picture of our one fish that has lesions due to ISK&B infection. So that fish was infected and diseased. When we looked at the results for nervous necrosis virus, we found that all farms were positive and the prevalence ranged from 13% to 100%. Again, we found moderate to high viral loads, and more importantly, we found a lot of disease on the histopathology. So for those two populations of fish that were actually experiencing the disease outbreak on the day we were there, we found all of the fish were infected and all of the fish had lesions in their retinas and brains. So that means that this is a very high likelihood of what was causing disease. When we went to the sea cage, so next it starts again with farmers reporting problems. This is an absolutely key piece of information where we have farmers that are having problems with disease outbreaks, with mortalities in their fish. And what they found is within about 2 to 4 weeks of transferring fish into their sea cages, the fish would be lethargic, they'd be non-responsive to stimuli, and new to this area, they hadn't seen this in the previous 4 or 5 years, they started to have outbreaks of leech infestations on the outsides of the fish. The farmers also reported a green body color to the eyes as well. So this study was done at sea cage farms in the northern coastal line of Bali, and we used a targeted sampling approach for this one. So it was really key. We had a number of farmer workshops and we had farmers alert the team as soon as they started to see evidence of clinical signs and some mortality. And so our collaborators, Dr. Merwin had his team stationed at the farm there. So we collected 24 fish from a farm that was showing clinical signs. And we also collected 12 fish from each farm that were not showing clinical signs. And again, we looked for a range of different pathogens. So here's one of our main results. The first one we looked for was our parasites. So the farmers had reported to us that leeches were causing issues. And what we found actually was there's no difference in the fish with clinical signs compared to the fish without clinical signs for the marine leech, as well as another parasite called Benedinia. Next, we found a whole bunch of abnormalities on the inside of the fish in their organs. So all the ones in the red boxes indicate where the fish with clinical signs had significantly higher proportion of these. In particular, fish with clinical signs had enlarged spleens and they had pale anterior kidneys. When we look at the virus detection, nervous necrosis virus was again positive at all farms. And interestingly, we found over half the fish, 55% of the fish were positive for this virus, and it didn't matter if they had clinical signs or didn't have clinical signs. However, we found no evidence of disease when we looked at pathology. So we have lots and lots of infection, but we don't have any disease caused by this virus. So it's probably least likely to have caused the outbreaks. But when we looked at ISK&B, again, all the farms were positive. We have a higher prevalence here. So we're seeing about 80 to 83% of the fish were positive. This time we see lots of disease. So all the histopathology, we have 67% to about 40% of the fish with and without clinical signs had evidence of disease. So this is what is actually causing the mortality in the fish. So we have infection and disease put together. And as much as we were hoping for a novel pathogen, it didn't happen. So we did a lot of unbiased sequencing where we essentially were looking for any newly emerging pathogens or pathogenic bacteria, and we didn't find any of those. So what can we summarize about our 2 outbreak investigations? Well, we know at both farms we have lots of parasites. We know we have lots of evidence of infection of ISK&B and NNV. But we really need to look at the histopathology. When we have pathogens that are endemic to the area and can be subclinical, we must get to the pathology to make sure we're attributing the right mortality event with the right pathogen. The other thing to remember is It's not any one of these pathogens that cause the disease. They do work together in a multifactorial approach. So it's much more complicated than just having a PCR machine and detecting one virus and then equating that to one disease. So I spoke earlier about megalocytis viruses and how some of their taxonomy is a little bit confusing. Some of this confusing taxonomy has actually led to the spread or possibly has led to the spread of this virus. So since 2017 or so, we actually have a new virus described in this group. So we have a second species, which is known as scale drop disease virus. This impacts so far barramundi in the same geographical region as ISKNV and RSIV. So remember when I said we used to say RSIV was just marine fish? This has become much more muddy. So all of our host species, and this is an exhaustive list, this is just a number of ones for demonstration. We're seeing infections with all the 3 different genotypes across a variety of species and hosts. We can no longer say that TRBIV is just for flatfish, as we know it can be found in a number of ornamental fish as well, and including barramundi. So here we have 3 very distinct virus genotypes, but they cause the same clinical signs and the same pathology in a huge number of fish hosts that live in either freshwater or marine environments. Another key feature is we actually don't have a really good PCR assay that can help us detect and then differentiate between the genotypes. We do have access to a vaccine for RSIV, but it only protects a little bit against RSIV, and it doesn't protect against the other genotypes. The other feature to remember is that only these 2 genotypes are actually OIE listed. TRBIV, which is now emerging in more aquaculture industries, is somewhat sitting over on the sidelines waiting to be thought about. So how do we go back to the farm and we think, how can we prevent these outbreaks happening at the farm? Well, I always come back to these 3 interlocking circles where we have our host, our pathogen, and our environment together. In this environment, we can't get away from the pathogens. These viruses are both endemic to that region, so they're there. We have to consider how we can keep that fish host very strong. So we need to have a high quality diet. We need to be doing health checks and diagnostic testing routinely. And of course, having a healthy environment will also keep disease outbreaks minimal or hopefully none. So we need to ensure adequate water quality and stocking density. So what happens when we do have disease outbreaks? Well, as I already highlighted, we do get interruptions in the supply of fish to the various production stages. When that happens, we generally get instability in production costs. So suddenly it costs a lot more to buy fish into your farm. It also causes instability in work available, especially in rural and smallholder farm areas. And this also leads to a lack of supply to consumers. When this happens, we often get cases where we suddenly have farms that are not financially viable and can close. We get gaps in family income. And of course, the prices of food that is essential food can change quite quickly. So how can we improve things looking forward? So it is World Ocean Day, and we need to think about how we can produce food in a sustainable, efficient, economic, and viable manner. Well, to do this, I feel we need collaborations amongst farmers, scientists, policymakers, and regulators. And we need this great big conversation to be happening across our production systems, the regional area, and at the international level. We can't be ignoring any one of those levels. There has to be conversations around biosecurity, veterinary diagnostics, and disease investigations to making sure that we have the right disease prevention and control measures in place. On top of this, we also need to have really strong connections to our biotechnology companies. So this could be ensuring fish health through nutrition. This could be developing vaccines. And we need to bring all of these people together for this communal conversation in order to effectively manage key diseases in certain regions. with my last minute, I really do want to thank, again, my collaborators. I've put the papers up if you're interested in reading the full studies. All of this work has been funded from the Australian Centre of International Agricultural Research. And the two students that I've supervised have both been very fortunate to receive John Allwright scholarships that have allowed them to study at the University of Sydney. And as highlighted previously, Wiley Publishers have just launched a brand new fisheries journal in their portfolio. It's called Aquaculture, Fish and Fisheries. It's an open access journal, and I've been very fortunate to be nominated as the editor-in-chief for this journal. And I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention because one of the key features for this journal is not about publishing results that are high impact and novel. They're actually about publishing results that are scientifically sound and may have a regional importance and are key findings to help support aquaculture, fish and fisheries. So with that, I think it's time for the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Madam. Very informative. Now you're the panel chair, so we will move to the panel discussion. Actually, we're supposed to finish by this time the panel discussion. We really like to hear about these things, but the thing is we are in the WOW program, so we have to be time strict. So I would expect your police support during the panel discussion to make the key points highlight only. So the panelists will be Professor Joy Baker, again the chair, and Professor Achinidhi Silva and Dr. MFM Fairuz, Dr. Palitha Kitsiri, Dr. HB Jayasuri, and Mr. Da and Dr. Ashoka will be the panelist, and rapporteurs will be Dr. Erandi Patirana, Dr. G. Dahanayaka, and Ms. Hashini. Now, kindly, I invite you to start the panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I think I've been talking for certainly a number of minutes, so I would like to open it to Dr. Faraz. You invited me to come and speak here today, and I'm very grateful for that. So I'll let you open the discussion.
Yeah, due to the time restrictions, I would like to say a few words in regard to the Sri Lankan situation, development of mariculture, because of the aquaculture need to be initiated under the scenario of overfishing and catastrophic situation. So I think mariculture is very much timely, and also parallelly there should be some educational research development in terms of biotechnology, microbiome studies, and also I am interested now actually studying the benthic impacts of the sea cage farming in Sri Lanka as well. So like this kind of knowledge creation is very much important. I think we can help to the government to create protocols, procedures to encourage farmers to do such activities, because which is leading to a lot of employment opportunities and also elevation of poverty, and providing food for protein sources to the people in Sri Lanka, as well as we can generate some income. So I think it's kind of a multiple thinking that I am going to confront here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. De Silva?
Yeah, thank you very much again. It's really a pleasure to join this event. And of course, with this your talk on disease management, how we can manage the cost and to bring the products in to a market. So it's my perspective on market. It's like when we talk about the disease management or this the biotechnology and all, probably we need to think about like when it comes to the countries like us. So the fish and seafood, of course, this is in a, like when it comes to the developed country markets, these are kind of a healthy luxury products, which usually fetch high prices. But when it comes to the countries like us, usually that is important for the poor man's plate, and that is more the essential component in their diet. So if we try to bridge this too, so we'll with the technology, if you are think about like what you mentioned, like the disease management. So to improve the biotechnology, more on vaccines, more on the product development through the ocean resources, probably we need because the technology, the expertise, the trained people, they're really lacking here in this kind of high-tech fields. Probably we need to have some kind of the co-creation platforms which the experts like you can join with the local experts and researchers, and of course with the communities. So to have some co-creation of knowledge, which really the country needs and which really we can bring it to the global marketplace as a product. So that is like, so these are the kind of my thinking. We need to be more with this the open innovation platforms where we can collaborate with many countries, many scientists globally, and to develop the industry locally. Again and again, thank you very much. Really inspiring talk. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Jayasuri? Oh, Doctor, I think you might be
muted. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Joy. Your presentation on disease management and biotechnology in this mariculture and aquaculture, and it was very attractive, and you have done a lot of work in this field. And also you know that our aquatic animal protein usage is very less compared to other countries, and also that inland aquaculture we have developed, but we have to develop this coastal and marine aquaculture. And there are two institutions we have in Sri Lanka, and National Aquaculture Development Authority and also NARA, and there are two institutions that are relevant to the aquaculture in this sector, and therefore we have to develop aquaculture in our this mainly mariculture and aquaculture, coastal aquaculture. And also that regarding this academic, and recently we developed a new degree program in Ocean University, that is seafood technology and aquaculture, and we are willing to produce these skilled graduates into this aquaculture sector. And also we need to develop this biotechnology and this laboratory experiments, and that part we have to develop in the Ocean University. And I think Dr. Lanka is working as a head of the department for that degree program, and we want to develop this aquaculture and seafood technology sector in future in our country. Thank you very much.
I think from my conversations with Dr. Feroz and others in Sri Lanka, it's a very exciting time for marine aquaculture in Sri Lanka. And some of the marine aquaculture is already developed, but you're sitting in this great place where you can think about how you want to develop your industry from today's perspective, whether you're thinking about biosecurity measures locally as well as regionally. There's a number of great resources that we can also basically rely on from other countries. So instead of reinventing the wheel, we can take things from other countries and see what works best in Sri Lanka. We also have to remember the context. So Sri Lanka sits in a region. Obviously, it's very close to India, and India has a very active aquaculture industry. So some of the pathogens that I'm most concerned with are actually already in some of the farming areas in India. So getting marine farming kicked off in Sri Lanka, pathogen surveillance will become really key in that zone. So I will just want to thank all the panelists for their conversation today. Thank you, Dr. Lanka, for hosting today. It's been an absolutely exceptional day. I have learned a lot from the discussions. So I will hand the floor back to you.
Madam, thank you very much. Madam, one of your panel members there, actually, her videos. Madam J. Ashoka is there. If you can take at least one wording from her, it would be better, madam.
My apologies. I didn't see that on my screen.
Dr. Ashoka, you can say it.
Please unmute.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We
yes,
can hear
we can.
you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, madam.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Go ahead,
Can you hear
please.
me?
Dr. Ashoka, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Madam,
Can
we
you
can
hear me?
hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you, Professor Joy, for your informative presentation. When we come to the marine aquaculture status, the major categories of marine species in Sri Lanka, fish, sea cucumber, and seaweed. When consider the marine finfish bass farming in cages, commence operation in Trincomalee Sea, scale marine-based farming of finfish to Sri Lanka. This project is also helpful to create a livelihood to coastal community through wild fishery and provide consistent supply base, generate export revenue, added tourist attraction, and provide forward linkage opportunities such as value-added fish production. There are two private sector sea bass hatcheries in Sri Lanka, and also there is also a government marine finfish hatchery in Sri Lanka to fulfill the need of marine finfish sheets. At present, we commence only breeding of sea bass, but we plan to commence breeding of other marine finfish species like grouper, snappers, silver pomfret, bream, and cobia. Sri Lanka has also good potential for development of commercial scale seaweed farming, and it is already commenced in Sri Lanka with Kappa ficus. And also Sri Lanka exports sea cucumber mainly from collecting sea due to the depletion of sea cucumber stocks in while it is bred sea cucumber juveniles. Therefore, we promote and facilitate sea cucumber farming in fencing sea to increase sea cucumber production and also to increase export revenue and to reduce the pressure on wild sea cucumber stocks. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, the developing industry in Sri Lanka is a very exciting place, and the variety of species is fantastic. Is that everyone for panel members? Have I missed anyone else? My apologies there.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay.
Dr. Lanka, I will give it back to you again.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you very much. We are really happy, and it's a very good information. So we will see in the future. Actually, we will have a very informative discussion. We expect your support in that time also. Thank you very much. And then let's move to the small video present by the NEFSO, one of our partner organization regarding the blue growth and small scale fisheries. Let's move on to video session.
The dominant discourse of the blue growth, blue economy is to accelerate, expand, and exploit the marine resources to bring sunken billions of the sea. It is happening through aquaculture, tourism, and infrastructure development, and other sea transportation activities, fisheries activities, seabed mining, and many other ways. So we would like to ask you to see how the fisher people affected with all these development activities and how their life is being affected.
හරි කනගාටුදායක සිදුවීමක් තමයි දැනට දීවරයන්ට තියෙන්නේ. දීවරයන්ට මාළු පැටියෙක් හොයාගන්න මුහුදට ගිහිල්ලා මාළු පැටියෙක් නැහැ. පළවෙනි කාරණේ ලයිලා ගැන. මෙයාලගේ ප්‍රොමිස් වලක තියෙන්නේ නායක සතුටින් 10ක් ගේමින් ගහන්න. මෙයාලා නායක සතුටින් 10ක් ගේමින් ගහන්නේ නැහැ මේ වෙනකොට. මෙයාලා සතුටුවක් සතුටුන් දෙකක් ඇතුළත ගහන්නේ. එහෙම සිද්ධියක් තමයි අපේ තලවිල උනේ. අපේ මාළු හැදෙන ඒ ගල් පරවේ ඇවිල්ලා ගැහැවා. ගල් පරවේ ගහලා මෙයාලගේ දැලු ගලේ වැටුනාම ওই ගල් සේරම කඩාගෙන තමයි මෙයාලා දඩස් කරලා දැල අල්ලන්නේ. එතකොට මෙයාලා ඩයින ගහනවා. ඩයින ගහපුවම මාළුන්ගේ වාස භූමි සේරම විනාශ වෙනවා. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් උදාහරණයක් කියනකොට අපේ ගෙයක් දොරක් කැඩුවොත් ඉතින් අපිට ඉන්න තැනක් නැති වෙනවනේ. ඒ වගේ තමයි මාළුන්ට බොහෝ වෙන්න තැනක් නැති වෙනවා.
අවිලා මේක ඔයගොල්ලන්ට දැන් ඉතින් අයිති නෑ. යන්න කියලා කිව්වා අපිට. අපි ඉතින් ඔක්කොම අපි 26 දෙනෙක් හිටියේ ඔරවකන්දේ. ඒ 26 දෙනාම අපි එවෙලම පිටක් කරුවා. එයාලා ඉතින් මේ හෝටල් ව්‍යාපාර තම කරනවා. අපිට පේන්නම තියෙනවනේ.
කියනවා බලදාරෙන්න කිසිම කෙනෙක් මේ ගැන බලන්නේ නැහැ අහන්නේ. දැන් අපි අවුරුදු කීයක් ඉඳන් කියනවද මුතුමන්ති මිනිසුන්ට යන්න දෙන්න තැනක් නැහැ කියලා ඉතින් කොච්චර ඉල්ලුවත් කිසිම දෙයක් රජයේ මේ මුතුමන්ති ජනතාව කියන කිසිම දෙයක් පිළිගන්නේ නැහැ. මේ ගම්මානයේ තව අවුරුදු 2ක් 3ක් ඇති මම දැන් ඔහොම මෝදල් පිළිලා අවසන් වෙන අය ගම්මානයේ.
சோழர்ல வருகையால எங்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரம் பாதிக்கப்பட்டிருக்குது. எங்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரம் எப்படி பாதிக்கப்பட்டிருக்குண்டா எங்களுக்கு வர வேண்டிய வருமானம், எங்களுடைய மீனவர்கள் பிடிக்க வேண்டிய மீன், எங்களுடைய கணவன் பிடிக்க வேண்டிய மீன், அது வர வேண்டிய வருமானம் எல்லாம் இந்தியன் சோழரால் அவங்க கொண்டு போறாங்க. பக்கத்து வீட்டில் நான் போய் எடுக்கிறது களவு. இவங்க அதைத்தான் இப்ப செய்யறாங்க, திருடுறாங்க. அடுத்த நாட்டில இருந்து எங்களுடைய நாட்டுக்கு, எங்களுடைய ஊருக்கு, எங்களுடைய படகுகளை செய்ய முடியாம அவங்க வந்து செய்து திருடி கண்டு போறாங்க. எங்களுடைய சொத்தை திருடுறாங்க.
வாரத்தில் வந்து 3 நாள் தான் தொழில், அது ஒழுங்காக செய்ய முடியாது, சரியான கஷ்டம். இதனால் வந்து வடகயிறு வெட்டு பிறகுதான் மிச்சம் முடிய மேலும் மேலும் கடனை பட்டு சரியான கஷ்டப்படி சனம்.
දැන් පෝට් සිටි වරායවල් හදන නිසා තමයි මේ වෙරළ ඔක්කොම කාදනය වෙන්න ගත්තේ. දැන් අක්කර මම හිතන්නේ මීටර් දැන් 100කට වඩා ප්‍රමාණයක් මේ මුහුදට කාදනය වෙලා ඉවරයි වෙරළ. ඉතින් ඒ කාලේ එච්චර ප්‍රශ්නයක් තිබ්බේ නැහැ. නමුත් දැන් ඉතින් ඒ අවදානම අපි මුහුණ දෙන්න සිදු වෙලා තියෙනවා. වරායවල් හදනවා, පෝට් සිටි හදනවා, අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම සංවර්ධන කටයුතු තියෙනවා. නමුත් දීවරයාගේ ඉදිරි පැවැත්මත් සුළුපන්න දීවරයාගේ ඉදිරි පැවැත්මත් පොඩ්ඩක් බැලුවොත් හොඳයි කියලා තමයි හිතන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ පෝට් සිටි ගාපු නිසා තමයි ගොඩක් වෙලාට මේ වැලි කඳු යන්න ගත්තේ. දැන් අවුරුදු 7-8ක වගේ ඉඳලා
අපේ පැති වලද රැකියාවක් කරගන්න බෑ, මාදලක් ගොඩ ඇද ගන්න බෑ, පොඩි බෝට්ටුවක් ගොඩ අරගන්න විදියක් නැහැ. මීටර් 50-100ක් ඉර තිබිච්ච මූදාද මීටර් 25ට පාරායින්ට කඩාන ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. මාදල් ව්‍යාපාරي, දීවර සුළුපන්න ව්‍යාපාර සියලු දේම නැති වෙන ලකුණු තමයි අපිට දැන් පෙනීගෙන යන්නේ. ඒකට කිසිම පිළිසරණක් නැහැ.
මේ තුරුබලට කියන්නේ සැන්ඩි බේ කියලා. මේ කාලේ නම් මාදා රස්සාවකදී එහෙම රත්තරන් රස්සාවක්. කාටත් යටහත් වෙන්න ඕනේ. අපි හිතුවොත් යනවා. නැත්තම් ගෙදරනේ දිය ගන්නවා. අපි මේ අන්තිම කෙරවල අපි වෙරළට මාළුන කලින් බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා. ඒක සංචාරක මේකට ඒගලන්ට හුඟක් ඉස්සෙ මොකද ඒවා විදේශ බිල්ම එනවා කියලා ඉවරලා. ඒවා දැන් අපි දැන් දානෝක 60කම 4කට 5කට යහන් අපි කියලා දාන්නේ. ඒකට අපිට මෙතන ඉඳන්ම අපේ රස්සාව කරාගෙන අපිට අපි තියෙන මේ දීවර ආම්පන්න බේර ගන්න බැරි සංසයකට තියෙන්නේ. දැන් අපි ගිලවෙලා මේ ගමෙන් ඉඳලා තව 60ක්ම 5කට 6කට දැම්මම පස්සේ අපි කොහොමද මේව ආරක්ෂා කරන්නේ? ඒ වගේ අපිට නිදාසේ රක්ෂා කරන්නත් බැහැ. මේ නිදාසත් නැති වෙනවනේ. සංවර්ධනය අවශ්‍ය තමයි. එනොත් අපිට යන කල
සංචාර කර්මාන්තය අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා සාම්ප්‍රදායික දීවර කර්මාන්තයක බද්ධව ඒකට ඔබිනව යන නමුත් මේ කාලේ තුර වෙලා තිබෙන ඊට වඩා හාස් ප්‍රශ්නයක්. සංචාර කර්මාන්තය ඉදමෙලදී ගන්නේ මේගොල්ලෝ උත්සාහ කරන මුහුද වෙරළ අත්පත් වෙట్లా තිබෙන තොටුපළවල් වගේම මහදල් තොටුපළවල් අහිමි වෙලා තිබෙනවා. වගේම ඒගොල්ලෝ උත්සාහ කරනවා කලප්පු ප්‍රදේශයේ ඊතරදී කඩාන පද්ධතිය විනාශ කරනවා හොටල් බෝට් වරින්න කරන්න වගේ දේවල් වලට. නමුත් මේ සිද්ධීන් දීර්ඝ වෙනවා පාලම ගාල්ල මීගමුව කල්පිටිය අපේ මොහොත්වාන ප්‍රදේශයේ මේ සිද්ධ වෙලා තිබෙනවා. ඉතින් අපි කියන්න කැමති සංකර්මාන්තය කරන්න ඕනේ මිනිස්සුන්ට අවශ්‍ය විදියට මිනිස්සුත් එක්ක එන කර්මාන්තය විසක් මිනිස්සු අයින් කළා නෙමෙයි. ඉතින් මේ දීවරයන්ගේ දීවර රැකියාව විනාශ කරමින් මේ කරන රැකියාවේ කර්මාන්තය කරලා කාට ප්‍රයෝජනයක් ඉන්නද? ඉතින් අපි කියන්නේ දීවර කර්මාන්තය එක්ක බද්ධ වුණු ඒකට ඒ දීවර ප්‍රේ කරන කර්මාන්තය කියලා කොහොමද කියන එකයි.
After listening to all these life struggles, the realities, and understanding what is happening in the fisher communities, we would like to ask the policymakers, the financial institutions, Food and Agriculture Organization, and all the responsible people to think their strategies, how to ensure the small-scale fishers will be living in a peaceful, decent life. So we urge everyone to rethink about their strategies.
Thank you very much, Nef. So great job. So we have come up with the final item. So now we have to finalize the sum up the sessions. So I cordially invite our Vice Chancellor of Ocean University of Sri Lanka, Dr. T.A.P.S. Siri, to sum up the key presentations of the sessions. Dear sir.
Hello. Thank you very much for the very lively presentations and discussions that we had over the last 2 hours now. And I like to sum up, not taking much time, but as an engineer looking at the whole seminar, right? Now, our Chancellor, Professor Oscar Amarasinghe, in his welcome speech, touched on the small-scale fisheries and the aquaculture aspects, and he gave a good description of the current status of fishing in Sri Lanka, and also he emphasized the new generation, the need of a new generation of scientists and technicians to take these processes forward in a sustainable manner, and also maintaining the health of the ocean. Then the Honorable Minister, Dr. Sita Anabepola, giving her speech as the chief guest, spoke of the need for harnessing the resources in the sea, especially in the greater economic zone, for the benefit of Sri Lankans in a sustainable manner. And she also spoke on the ocean health, and also on the promotion of with the use of and ocean related activities. And also, she also said, because as the minister in charge of the skills development and vocational training, and she emphasized the need of developing the professionals and technologies in the sector, and also the need of then we had the keynote speech from Professor Stephen Gentoff on the topic of risks and opportunities for small-scale fishing in the blue economy. And he, with lots of life experience in this sector, he spoke on the guidelines for blue economy and the need for those such guidelines, and also the guidelines for small-scale fishing. So these are matters. I think there are certain dimensions in the global scene, and there are certain dimensions local to those countries. So each country also need to have the small-scale fishing, the guidelines, the policies, and all that. So I'm sure that Sri Lanka also has such policies. I noted that the Sinhala and Tamil translations of the policy is also available. Then the importance of listening to the fishing communities was emphasized by Professor Stephen, and the language spoken by the communities, and the need to communicate in a manner that it was understood by the relevant communities in the fishing communities and other communities associated with the sea activities. Then he spoke on the blue justice, incorporating the local knowledge. So the discussion was very lively. We had very distinguished participants in the panel, and they spoke on the increasing of income, the eradication of poverty, the food security, and all these aspects of global nature as well as the local nature for the benefit of the communities. The second keynote speech came from Professor Joy Baker on the diseases in aquaculture, and it is more of a detailed subject analysis of how the freshwater and seawater fish are affected with these diseases and how they can control. So these aspects were very vital at this juncture, to Sri Lanka as a nation of had a nation that had a long fishing and sea experience, and also the Sri Lankan economy is very much depending on the activities connected with the sea. One is fishing. We earn a lot of income from export of fish and fish-related products, as well as we were earning lots of income from the tourism and other related activities. Though with the current pandemic situation, we have not having much tourist activities, but these are activities in the long run which can be developed in Sri Lanka for the benefit of the Sri Lankan nationals and all in the communities. Now, all these things are possible if we have a healthier sea, because we need to protect the environment, and also we need to see that the living beings of these oceans are also safeguarded and harnessed in a sustainable manner, so that we have a win-win situation. So with this, I would like to conclude this summing up, and also thank the keynote speakers and the panelists and all the other participants who contributed for the success of this very important webinar. Thank you very much.
My face. Thank you, sir, for your presentation of the summary of the outcome of the from the technical sessions and as a whole of the program. Thank you very much. So now the last item of the agenda is belonging to me to deliver the vote of thanks, which is the hardest and the challenging task as the coordinator of the program. I think we have now reached to the limit of the TBI too. Also, I expect that TBI will not be shut down, because I will be in trouble if I don't thank to the people. So let me to start with the vote of thanks. So ladies and gentlemen, now I'm much happy and pleased to extend my sincere gratitude to all of you for the virtual participation of the international webinar organized by the Ocean University of Sri Lanka in partnership with Ministry of Fisheries, Sri Lanka Fisheries Forum, NARA, SLAFA, MIPA, and NEFSO, representing both government and non-governmental academic research and community in the fisheries field. Thank you very much. Most importantly, I thank the State Minister of Skills Development, Vocational Training, Research and Innovation, Honorable Dr. Sita Arambepala, for being the chief guest today, even amidst with your other commitments. Thank you, madam. Your presence is great strength for us. I would like to extend my thanks to the Board of Governors of Ocean University of Sri Lanka, who govern us always towards the right direction with their expertise. Thank you. It is with a deep sense of gratitude that I thank the Madam Taijen Arin of the World Bank and Mr. Charles Villa of the FAO for sending the message to our webinar, which I am sure will open up avenues for future collaboration with your esteemed institutions in our efforts towards making the Blue Growth Initiative socio-economically and environmentally sustainable. I am deeply indebted to our keynote speakers, Professor Swain Yentoff and Professor Joy Baker, who have been principal actors of the seminar, broadening the horizons of our knowledge on blue growth and its impact on the life and livelihoods. I also greatly appreciate the participation of our renowned scientists in conducting very fruitful panel discussions, adding to the knowledge already generated by the keynote speakers. We are particularly thankful to our foreign panelists, Professor Martin and Mr. Sebastian Matthew, and not forgetting to thank our own scientist, Professor M.G. Kularatna, the University of Kelaniya, Professor Achinidhi Silva, University of Sabaragamu, Dr. J. Ashoka, Director, Coastal Aquaculture Development of NACDA, Dr. M.F.M. Fairuz, Dr. H.B. Jayasiri, Professor Oscar Amarasinghe from Ocean University, and their invaluable contributions in conducting interesting and productive panel discussions. and to all the reporters for your huge and but behind support in reporting. This webinar, which became a session of WOW program, was a combined effort of all our partner organization and the TBI. Thank the partner organizations, the directors and the chairs, and especially the partner committee represented by all the partner organizations. Hearty gratitude to you. Looking forward to working with you in the future too. A gigantic task was undertaken by the TBTI, too big to ignore. Incorporating this webinar into their WOW program, which involved an array of hard and time-consuming tasks. In this respect, we are all extremely grateful to Madam Ratna for all her efforts and her team who educated us, guided us, and in doing this wonderful job. We salute you, TBTI, for all your efforts. Even though it's my home, I cannot forget my sincere family members. Dear Chancellor, Sir, Professor Oscar Singh, I would say this will not be materialized without you. Looking forward to your further guidance, sir. The present captain of the Ocean University ship, Dr. T. Piasiri, the Vice Chancellor of Ocean University, though it was still a short period you've been the Vice Chancellor here, your assistant guidance is not short, but very long, sir. The leader of administrative of Ocean University, Mr. Hemant Ratnayaka, the registrar, the director of training, Mr. Opul Pereira, to deans of the faculties, my colleague, head of the departments, lecturers, directors, SAR, assistant registrars, and all the academic supportive staff. ADs of all our 8 regional colleges, like to extend my thanks for your continuous encouragement and generous support to move forward the program, and shall we move on to the new era of Ocean University. I remember Professor Ranjit Senaratne during his leading period in Ocean University said that it would not be a hospital with doctors only, but there should be patient compulsory. So fulfill the theme of the university, our spirit is our students. I hope students will not be angry with me for being the similar to the patient, but with our current leader to the ministry, being an MBBS doctor, Madam Sita Arambepola would agree with me that we are serving to patients, including us, changing the role at any time. So students, your performance, activities and attendees are highly appreciative, and wish you all the brilliant future who focus the heart of the world and the ocean. Mr. Krishan Rajapaksha, the IT service provider to us, I cannot thank you enough, because you have given not only the technical help, but you're beyond the limits. Whenever needed, you assist all of us, including our students too. Also, I cannot forget the remarkable support rendered by Ms. Kaumi Piasiri from NARA. Deeply appreciate all your support extended to us. I have not dropped any of you, I think. No intention at all too. But in case, if I missed any of you, I do apologize from the bottom of my heart. But again, please accept all my heartiest love, appreciation, and thanks to all your sacrificing deserves and well-wishing. All done. But who will be appreciate my job? So with lots of sleepless and tired nights, even yesterday, which made my normal pleasant appearance dull for you today. It's just a small joke. So to give you a least joy mood, because I know after this, we all again fall into the pathetic reality facing all the world today with the COVID-19 monster. That's why my heartfelt gratitude to all of you. Your participation is remarkable today, not only, but to the technology and the technical teams, including Zoom, that made us assemble today. I should thank, unless we may never meet in this platform. In this World Ocean Day, I would give you my message as, please respect the ocean, protect the ocean, sustainably utilize the ocean, and last but not least, be a part of the ocean. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe. May you all live long. Thank you very much.